Hi, Array Crew. I'm Nicole. I'm part of the Array Crew team, and I am so excited to welcome you to the first in a series of Array Crew Conversations. This idea was born from a conversation with Array founder Ava DuVernay, and she wanted to make sure that knowledge in the crafts was being shared and passed from the amazing craft people she's worked with on Array Productions to all of Array Crew. So thank you to Ava, the Array Crew team, and tonight a special thanks to Dominique Dawson, the costume designer for DMZ, and to Scott Dougan, the production designer for DMZ. And keep in mind, everybody, there may be spoilers. So if you haven't watched DMZ on HBOMax, go watch now. This is going to be recorded. You can come back to this conversation later. But we are having a hard stop today, so let's get right into it. We'll bring ourselves back into the story by watching the DMZ trailer. And then Dominique and Scott will kind of introduce themselves and talk about their work on DMZ. And then they'll answer some of your questions. So thanks so much for joining us tonight. And let's take a look at the trailer.
Dude, here is my son. I lost my son in the evacuation.
Christian! Where is he?
Manhattan.
You won't be stuck in an active war zone.
There's a new world coming, and it's just around the bend.
Damn it, Nova! Stay low!
There's a new world coming. This one's coming to an end.
They call this a demilitarized zone. This ain't no neutral territory. This is abandonment. They walled us in.
There's a brand new morning.
That's Scale's public hit list. If you're not crossed out, you're next.
Rising clear and sweet and
If the DMZ's taught me one thing, it's that there's no room for pretending here.
My only pursuit here is my son.
You are stepping into stratospheres of consequence.
there's a new day dawning.
You shouldn't come back.
Some of you chose to stay here. Some of you had been left behind. All of you survived.
Coming in love.
Why did you come back?
For you.
So that was our amazing world of DMZ. So let's just get started sharing all of your stories and how you built the worlds and how just your jobs came along.
Who wants to kick it off?
All right, I'll go first, I guess. I'm Scott. I was a production designer for DMZ, as Nicole said. I guess there's a lot of interesting things about DMZ, but one of them, just to say off the bat, is that we started it and we shot the pilot before the pandemic hit in March of 2020, and then we came back to it almost a year later and shot 3 more episodes, which I think influences it. There's a lot of things to talk about in the making of and the design of DMZ, but I think one of the big things is we were telling the story of a world centered around Rosario Dawson, Black and brown characters, like living in an abandoned city. I personally left Atlanta, where we shot the pilot, back to New York City and went to an abandoned city. There's a lot of the story that's very present, that I think we wanted to make very present. And I myself watching it, it felt very impactful. The work that everybody was able to do, and Ava and Ernest were able to do, and our amazing actors, Rosario and Ben Brad, and everybody else. So I'm mostly open to questions about like how that came about, but that's what I would say.
Definitely. And for me, I, was able to come on board and really I had the luxury of having worked with Scott and Ava and our DP, Matt Lloyd, on a previous project. So we kind of were already in lockstep in how we communicated about the world, and we were able to make something really special. The rules of DMZ are very specific and a unique scenario because it's in the distant future. So once we set up those rules of the space, figuring out what resources are available to people, all of these, what they had access to, all of these facts kind of influenced the choices that we made for both production design and costumes. So.
Great. Could you tell us a little bit more about how your departments came together with other departments on the show and how you built that world? And this may contain some spoilers, so everybody look out for that. But just, give us some more of that discussion about just how you were able to create the world.
I mean, I think one of the things that Dom was saying is like, I think whenever you're building a world, and especially if you're building a world that's a fantasy, however close to reality it might feel, like you're setting up your own rules. And one of the really important things for us was that it wasn't the sort of typical washed out, abandoned, like gray and blue and green world, but that it was a world full of color. And I think that's not just an aesthetic opinion about like how design and stylistically movies have sort of become darker and less colorful. I think I love darkness and I can definitely deal with desaturated spaces, but part of it came from the idea that what the outside world presumed the DMZ to be, the world that we see briefly when they're in the Barclays Center, when they're in the arena, was not what it actually was. And that there was like a vibrant world full of art and full of community. And that ultimately what Alma's character, what Z taps into, is an idea that the community is in fact, the community that's being built by humans who have been abandoned and who have been left behind is more powerful than the destructive forces of Parco and Wilson. That the sort of violence and desire for power is actually not as potent as art and life and desire for community. And that's kind of like comes right into, I think, how we ended up designing the whole story.
Yeah, and I think we really tapped into really like the heartbeat of New York City. I mean, New York City itself is made up of so many different boroughs, but even within Manhattan, where our story was set, there's so many different communities, and having the luxury to be able to showcase them, in these dire stakes of the DMZ was really a fun mission, people, like I said earlier, like they didn't have access to as many things, but those who were higher up and had more power do. So we could really go wild with the silhouettes and just the way people express themselves through fashion. And Ava really gave me a lot of freedom to be able to explore some more edgy looks for people, which we had a great time with.
Yeah, and that goes to space too. I mean, I would say a very early conversation for both Wilson and Parco was, especially Parco, was like, if you're the king of Manhattan, like, where do you go? And, do you go to the penthouse at, on Park Avenue, or do you sort of just take over the place that you know? And the idea is sort of like he takes over the nice brownstone in the 116th Street and York or over there and the far east side of Spanish Harlem, but and similarly with with Wilson, like he's taking over a block of Division Street down near Canal. But the important idea being like, they didn't decide to go move to Hudson Yards, or they didn't decide to go, go up on the One World Trade Center and make that where they lived. They embed themselves in their own communities, and sure, like they take art from the MoMA and they, take the fanciest things that they can get their hands on. And in the case of, Wilson, he's taking lights and everything he can grab. But it's rooted in the person who is rooted in their community. So that was, I think, a really important choice, because it could, a story like this could go any sort of different way.
Yeah. And the emphasis on the quest for materialistic possessions was still semi-present with our two leaders, Parco and Wilson. But I think at the end of the day, it was really the power that they wanted, and they recognized that the money was associated with that. And so the way they dressed themselves every day, the garb that they wore, it was a lot of peacocking to show everybody in the DMZ that they're the leader. They got this area of town on lock, and soon they'll have the whole place, after the election. So just how they came together was also just so fun, because I got to vibe off of the actors' spirits and just meeting them and being in fittings, and really getting to tap into their energy and what they were bringing to the character early helped me tremendously.
I've got a little bit of audience feedback that I wanted to share with you as well. One of our audience members is saying that she loved that even in a post-war action drama, you showed things in full color and brought those colors in and really used that as part of your storytelling. Can you tell us more about your choices with colors and how that worked into the wardrobe and setting and all of that as well?
Yeah, definitely. I think for me, specifically with Alma, I wanted to really show her journey, showing how a woman who's already a strong woman, but finds her courage and almost like blossoms into this beautiful leader. What does that look like, right? When we first get into the DMZ, she's really shutting off the DMZ. She's got blinders up. She's on a mission for her son. She's not interested really in engaging with the citizens of the DMZ unless she has to. So her clothes are very protective. They're very dark. And over the course of her, understanding the humanity that lives in the DMZ, she's able to open up. She becomes more exposed. You see her in more earth tones, and she's literally warming up to this new space. And you see her blossom, like I said, into this leader that, she didn't even know she had that in her. She didn't even know she wanted that. But by the end, she's head to toe just in ivory, and she's open and ready for her new future, fully prepared, and she knows that that's going to be in the DMZ. So that just making that journey for me was really, really important.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, probably the clearest depiction of sort of how much we did to bring color in was how many artists were involved in this. And I think, Array crew members watching and people who've been on films before, the licensing and the getting of art is a big part of design. And we made that, I made that a huge priority really early on, with Ava to contact as many people as we possibly could. And I had some friends in New York, a woman named Yasmin Ramirez, who helped me contact a bunch of New York artists. Ava contacted friends, I contacted friends, but we used, the mural in Skell's Loft is by this amazing Puerto Rican artist, Celso Gonzalez. There's Anguria, whose artwork is at who's a Dominican artist whose artwork is at the Array campus. Did the giant mural of Z. In the pilot, there's like, you know, from the famous to less famous, there's Fiorella Baez. There's a painting of hers in Wilson's layer next to a Rembrandt. So there's contemporary artists and, you know, and a Gauguin. And then, you know, I could name Sophia Dawson with her giant mural, and B. Mike has a mural in Spanish Harlem. We actually chose a street that had a bunch of artists who had done work there, all from Atlanta, who graciously let us, you know, license their work, you know, paid them and licensed their work. We took everything all the inspiration we possibly could to include those, and you know, there's many that I'm not mentioning, but it would take this entire time to mention all of them. And the idea basically is like we really, really took our time contacting and involving those artists in the work, because that color, literally, that, you know, Angel Otero, who's like a fairly famous artist now, like has a painting in Parco's Brownstone. It's like, it's, you know, it's there next to another painting, but like, I think next to there's like a Picasso on the wall there, actually. And it's like all of them being part of this world and showing new contemporary art alongside the oldest art that you could possibly get from the Metropolitan Museum or the MoMA, was like the idea of that being that that's what people do. That's actually like, that's the thing that humans do when they're have very little, is actually to create and to tell stories to each other. And it's not all just like violence and growing food, or, you know, what you're going to put on your feet. That like there's something else that's very necessary for us. J.C. Rivera is an artist from Chicago, created the banner for Parco. And our in-house artist, you know, graphic designer Kate Emery, and did the banner for Wilson. So you know, amazing people within the art department, amazing people that we were licensing, the work of Dom and of Matt Lloyd and of Ava, like helping us find people, was a huge part of, I think, what the show is.
And I really have to give it up for Scott, because he created such dynamic, layered spaces that, I mean, I have to say one of my favorite scenes of the whole show is when, you know, Nico and Odie go into the tent with all the magical art. I mean, just that breath into the tent, it's like you're stepping into a sacred space. And there's such an appreciation for the way the art is suspended within the tent. And just for that moment, the kids get to escape. And that's what art does. You know, their pain's gone, they're just dreaming and being kids. And that's such a special scene for me. I really, it was impacting when we shot it, but watching it after, it also spoke to, you know, mental health. And, you know, the guy who collected all that art, he was a security guard at the Met and kind of had a breakdown through this DMZ experience and wasn't all there. But his desire for art never changed. You know what I mean? And that was still his priority through it all, and his comfort, really. So those were some of my favorite moments for sure.
Amazing. Amazing. I'm going to go to some questions from the audience. We've got about 5 minutes left. So if you have questions out there, Array crew, please drop them in the chat, and I will do my best to get to as many as we can throughout this wonderful discussion. But one question that we've had is, what kind of research goes into preparing to build these types of worlds in each of your roles? Or if you can speak to any of your other colleagues, if you know some of the things that they've worked on as well.
That's a huge question. The answer is a lot. I'll go quick because there's only so many, but like in DMZ, first of all, the research happened from over a year, which you don't always get a chance to. But I would break research down into stuff that's tonal, like gestural and tonal. Like, I mean, I'm not going to I'll give you a small taste of it, but like Chinatown, I feel like the first image that Ava and I picked out was actually like something that I had from like Italian Vogue back in the 1990s or something that I just like happened to have in a book that I had. And I'll bring like a bunch of books to a job. So there's that part of it, books and the internet and Instagram and whatever you can find, like a boogie, photograph or whomever.
Right.
But then there's like the research, right? So you're doing work on muralists and what farms look like in places that have been abandoned. You're looking for abandoned spaces in the Soviet Union or in Cuba, So there's layers to it. That's just like the first start of it. But extensive is extensive and as organized as you can make it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I kind of did some research on the actual architecture of Manhattan to see what scraps we could pull together to create these custom armor pieces for both the Chinatown side and the Spanish King side, So I was really trying to just hone in on like, what's actually there? It's like I've been to New York so many times, but like it all kind of just goes over your head. So paying attention to the landscapes, texture, and then also just, doing New York City justice. Like, I had the luxury where I got to go to New York and like take pictures of just walking around and just seeing all the great fashions and the way people put themselves together. Like that's the best research for me,
Yeah, and like I actually I'm in Los Angeles right now, but I live in New York, and so like, there were certain things like, I don't know if anybody here is in New York, but like if you go to Dime Square, which is a new name for the intersection of East Canal and Division, but like that's where I was like, this is like, I took pictures around there because I was like, this is something that we can match in Atlanta and we can build and decide that this is where Wilson is, and bring in elements from, other parts of Chinatown, the part of Chinatown that's west of the Bowery too, but signage wise. But we also I went up to the cloisters and took photos from there, to show to Roberto and Ernest and of what things would look like. And Roberto, the writer, our executive showrunner and executive producer would actually email me while they were in post and be like, what's out this one? Or like, did you have a reference for this one? And so it was super collaborative, from the very beginning, conceptually, research wise, all the way to the end.
And the way Roberto even writes or conceives of his worlds is it's so thorough. So I could literally just text him any little thought and then he would spin off and be like, it could be this, it could be that. What about this? And that's just a treasure, because you don't always get that with the showrunner. So he was just so available and that helped.
Yeah, I was definitely expecting Scott to mention architecture and all of those things in your work, but I was quite surprised to find out, Dominique, for costumes that played a role for yours as well. So incredibly interesting to hear.
Well, yeah, just because there's so many baseball fields and soccer fields and around New York City, and we ended up using a lot of baseball helmets and hockey mask helmets in the war, because that was what they would have had access to. So just paying attention to what the big landmarks are there, and even thinking about trash, what do people throw away? How can they reuse bottle caps and soda cans? And all of that is good metal that they could use to build armor with as well. So
interesting. We've got one last question I think we've got time for today, but Pamela from our Array Crew group wants to know from Scott that Scenic Design was so thoughtful and impactful. So how did you select your team of collaborators, designers, buyers, and to make sure that everybody was kind of on the same wave? And I'd love to hear that from Dominique as well in wardrobe.
I mean, I would say, so first of all, when I came back after the pandemic, the art director for the pilot, Miguel Lopez Castillo, who's worked with me for a while, he had another job. So I was on the search for an art director coming into the project, and found my chief collaborator friend, for all of time, Asia Rowley, actually on Array Crew. So just to say it out loud, I went to, and I had worked over the pandemic. I had talked to Tammy Garnes, who's running Array Crew, about this database and like how it could work and how you find people and what it's used for. And so I had an amazing prop master, Emily Weston, who was able to come back, an amazing set decorator, Lance Totten, who was able to come back. But I didn't have an art director. So I looked on Array Crew and lo and behold, I actually, found somebody that is just a key collaborator for me for the rest of my life. And I think, part of that is when you assemble a team, there's a lot of people in an art department. As I'm sure a lot of folks know, you have set deck and props and, locations to a certain extent, is a huge part of a production designer's work. So all of those collaborators, I think for me, the most important thing is finding people who are open and who are good. I think a production designer has to be a good listener. I think, you're looking for an art director or a prop master. They have to be people who are willing to share their talents and willing to, do that in a way that's positive, like the show is. Like it's about community. I think there's a long history in art departments and in movie making that's like hierarchical and combative, which is just not a way to go about, in my mind. Other people have other styles, but like, at least for me, it's not a way to go about making art together. And I actually think Array Crew is an amazing database for that, because I don't know if you even go onto Array Crew and sign up for Array Crew if you're not willing to sort of expose yourself in a kind of way. And looking for women and Black and brown folks who are not cisgendered white males like me to like talk about characters in spaces that are not inhabited by a bunch of white dudes. So I think that's a really important thing. And so I thank Array Crew. I mean, I deeply thank it for helping me find folks.
Yeah, we'd love to hear that. That definitely makes us feel great about what we're doing and how it's impacting people and telling amazing stories. So Dominique, I'd love to hear that same. How do you find your collaborators and make sure that everybody is telling the same story?
Yeah, well, for me, I was so lucky because we got to do a majority of our prep in LA, because I just knew that with the type of looks that we were going to be serving on this show, I wanted to have access to more. So me and my team went hard, and it was difficult because I was literally prepping everything for the whole run of the show, but we went into overdrive, and it was so wonderful. It was like Christmas when we got to Atlanta and we opened up all our e-crates and we got to see all the treasures that we had found. And I got to kind of explain and set the tone with my new Atlanta crew. I had 3 crew members who were able to travel with me, which was like a miracle. And they helped me kind of just be the glue, between me and my new Atlanta crew. And honestly, like, it was just about like really honing in on how to find those textures and the colors that we needed to make this bold, vibrant world, right? So we were shopping abroad, we were having things flown in, we were having things built, like we were in thrift stores, we were everywhere. But at the end of it, I think it's a great collage of the melting pot of New York. So
that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Any final thoughts before we close out today?
I should say the name of my art director. I realize it's in everybody's name except for Asia Kai Rowley, who is the amazing art director of DMZ and Array Crew member. So all of you Array Crew members, thank you to all of you.
Yeah, thank you. And I remember there was one day where a message started going around set that was like, meet over by the garage door at 2:45. There's a photo shoot going down. And so it was like all the people of color that were on our crew got to come and stunt for a second and just vibe. And it was such a great moment just to feel how many of us there were. And that's just something that I'll never forget. That was life for sure.
And that very photo has been shown in that Array Crew group. A few of the crew members from DMZ are members of the group. So hello to everybody. You can say hi to them. And they've shared that picture, and we definitely felt that vibe that that you're expressing right now.
Yeah, we are mighty.
So I just wanted to say one more time, thank you so much to Scott Dougan and to Dominique Dawson for joining us tonight. And thanks to each of our Array crew members for joining us tonight. And next week, we're going to do it again with the crew members from One Perfect Shot, and just have some more conversations and information sharing, and just continue to get to know each other and support each other. So thank you again, and have a wonderful evening, Array Crew Facebook.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody.